We will be joined in just a moment with our special guest, Harley Schlanger from the LaROUCHE Foundation. And, of course, Harley has been very busy dealing with the issues of the GOP election here, but also with global issues in Europe and around the world. And it always... Harley, welcome back to the program. Let's start from the top.
Okay. Well, from the top, look, the Obama administration is completely crazy, and I know we talk about it a lot,
right.
But you look at the statement that was covered by Ben Rhodes, who's Obama's one of his top national security advisors, and it gets right to something that LaRouche put out a few months ago about Obama's killer mentality. Ben Rhodes said, as we had documented, that this comes from his stepfather, who was a killer in Indonesia during the CIA-run civil war there, which killed over 100 to 200,000, maybe as many as 500,000 people. And what Ben Rhodes said is that Obama's experience as a young boy in Indonesia with that kind of killing prepared him to make the hard choices he has to make today. Well, that's exactly what you and I have been talking about. He's a satanic personality. For him, power is the ability to kill people.
Right.
And so his top national security advisor is admitting that in a publication.
Wow.
So it gives you a sense of how demonic this guy is. Now, meanwhile, the press is filled with stories that not the mainstream press, but you can find these stories about how Putin has completely outflanked Obama. Today, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, which is a major publication in Germany, which is one of the strongest pro-American, pro-NATO publications you can find, came out and said what Obama's doing with NATO against Russia is senseless, it's dangerous, and it's that Obama doesn't realize he's being outflanked by Putin every step of the way.
Right.
So when your strongest allies are saying you're doing it all wrong, that should be a signal. Now, also, there is the story that was in Stratfor, which is one of these defense-related think tanks, which pointed out that the anti-ballistic missile system that we're putting in Romania and also that we want to put in Poland, that we originally had the fiction was aimed at Iran. But now with the Iran deal, why do you need it? Well, the Russians said from the beginning it was aimed at Russia. The Stratfor's defense analysts say it's a worthless system, that the maximum it could do would be knock out a few incoming missiles.
Right.
And if Russia actually launched an attack, they wouldn't just send 5 or 6 missiles. It would be a full-scale assault. And therefore, this is a symbolic system, but it wouldn't work.
Right.
And then there was a third article in Defense News about how Russia and China are developing hypersonic forms of air transport that include the ability to launch missiles and other kinds of capabilities far ahead of the U.S. capability. So you see that there are some realists out there who are pointing out that this is a terrible policy. And yet the policy continues. And the Republicans in Congress are going along with these things. The Democrats are going along with Obama. There's supposedly a great new surge of support for Obama, which I don't see, except in the media.
Yeah, the media try to create. They're like magicians. They try to create things that don't exist.
So we're in a moment of great danger. What Lyndon LaRouche said last night is that this spring and summer will be again a very dangerous period. And then just to put the final cherry on the sundae on this picture, the EU foreign ministers met to discuss Greece. Now, Greece has been out of the headlines for months, but that's not because the situation there has been solved. In fact, the problem they have is that the International Monetary Fund is now saying they're not going to do their share of the 90 billion euro agreement, bailout agreement that was reached, because it's not going to stop the debt problem. The debt problem is unsustainable, and this won't help. Now, if the IMF pulls out, and IMF is providing almost half the money, the EU is going to have to provide that other half. Where's it going to come from? Germany? and you already have a collapse of the popularity of the two leading parties in Germany. So we're seeing nothing but instability and chaos as a result of this collapsing London-centered American empire. And the quicker we get out of it and away from it, the faster we're going to solve our problems.
Yeah, right now we're in a no-wins game heading toward World War III. We're deep into the economic phase of it, aren't we?
Very deep. And you had Neil Kashkari, who has pretty bad credentials. You know, he's Goldman Sachs. He was Hank Paulson's fair-haired boy who was chosen to come with him to the Treasury Department. He ran for governor of California and got smashed. But now he's the head of the Minneapolis Fed, and he's doing some good things. He's been having these seminars on what are the limits of the Fed, what the Fed should do, what U.S. regulatory policy should be. He's called for breaking up the big banks. He's warned that we're headed toward a new financial collapse. And yesterday he gave a speech in which he said, all this fiction about interest rates being the key to the economy, he said the only thing fiddling with interest rates does is make things worse.
Yeah,
and he said,
it frightens part of the economy that could tip it over this Jenga pile that could become a disaster.
And what he said is that it's largely a question of economic policy that's the responsibility of the Congress and the White House. And he said that's where the problem lies. We don't have any competent economic policy. And I think he's absolutely right in that.
Well, I think it's on purpose, though. I don't think it's by chance. I think that the powers that be want to pull down the world economy. They want to collapse it toward a matrix where money is only in their supercomputers, where they humble and crush the BRICS nations by collapsing the entire world economy, because the current economic phase of World War III is increasing the chances that not only will America collapse, but so will China. China's not as solid as people think. They have this giant manufacturing capacity. New job they have 9 to 10 people ready to fill that job. They have had to build, in the last 5 years, 100,000 warehouses to store goods that they can't ship because the economy is crashing worldwide. And 50% of the loans in China for business are shark loans at 20% or higher. So they're teetering. And despite the fact they have this giant manufacturing engine, they don't even have a domestic market. It's only the top 10% of the population that actually have an income. The rest of them are 200 years in the past. Their agrarian population are basically subsistence.
Well, I think I would question some of that on China. The Chinese are definitely having a tough time, but not nearly as tough as the rest of the world. But here's something for you.
Well, that's true, but they're more likely to have a revolution in China than even in the Middle East, because what's going on, if the economy crashes there, they're going to really have revolt against the Communist Party. What's happening is they want to start and get it to stop using dirty coal. They want to have and I think Trump will actually start making deals that will be win-win for both sides. That'll get us to be able to veer away from playing chicken with World War. What do you think, Harley?
Well, I lost your sound there for a moment at the end, but I just wanted to ask you if you'd heard this, that the Queen of England was caught on a microphone attacking the Chinese, saying they had been very rude to her ambassador. And you have clearly a decision that's been made by the Western financial elite, whether it's intentional or not. I think they'd prefer not to have the economy collapse, but I think they realize their policies are leaving them with no option. So therefore they're scrambling to make sure that when a collapse occurs, they control the key nexus points, namely the U.S. government and the central banks, the European Central Bank and so on. And whether they try to wipe out the debt in one form or another, or just wipe out the bank debt, or hyperinflate so the banks can pay off their debt with cheap money, whatever they try isn't going to work. Now, the thing that you have with China, which is a non-linear factor, is that the Chinese are not, to some extent, they're part of this financial system, but they also exist outside of it. And a lot of their new loans that they've been making in the last few years, are physical loans. They're for productive purposes. And so they are trying to write down some of the fluff in the economy, which we're not doing. We're just creating more fluff in the economy.
And that's because of what our eventual plan is. I'll make a little statement here. I don't want to get, it's a little bit humorous, but it's scary. Remember the statement by Mayor Amschel Rothschild several hundred years ago? I care not what kind of government they have, but he who prints the money. I'm going to make a statement now in the early 21st century. I care not who prints the money, but who controls the data of the world. And guess who controls the data of the world? It's the NSA. Most people don't realize even the phone system in China is 3Com. All of the industrial espionage that we've allowed or put through the pipeline of It's a Real Hell, Israel, and other states, it has literally suckered China and other countries, primarily China, into thinking, lulling them into this kind of sense that they're in control of their destiny. And in actual fact, we're heading toward a cashless system where the people... And that's where we're going. And the nuclear missiles and the other things are things that you can polish in your underground silos, but no one is ever going to use them. Because they do, not only do we have weapons to destroy them, they have weapons to destroy us. And there's lots of ways. Biological weapons, scalar weapons, geotectonic weapons. 5 countries can control weather now. So the real issue is who is going to control the data. That's the 21st century. It's not money anymore. People don't realize because money will just become data. It'll be just a subset of data. And that's where we're all going.
Well, and that's the whole talk about the cashless society and things of that sort. But, you know, I think we should stay out of the realm of scenarios for the moment and just focus on the opportunities that come from the fact that the financial system is on its extremely weak legs, and that the people who are controlling it don't have any options that are good for the majority of the population.
Well, the reason why I mentioned that is this, okay? We're heading toward a singularity in technology, artificial intelligence, life extension. We're probably going to reach that singularity within the next 20 years in all these areas, including energy. The Chinese announced 3 years ago they were going to assign 3,600 Chinese nuclear scientists to create tokamak fusion reactors, which we've had for 60 years. But we won't release the technology, and they haven't had access to it yet. The fact is, many of the problems that we have on planet Earth could be solved by simply taking things out of Warehouse 13. They don't want it. I talked to Dr. Ron Klatz, who 3 years ago at the World Economic Forum, and they had a specific forum dealing with transhumanism or life extension. And they purposely tried to in fact, they want to make it illegal to actually have human life extension in every country. And they managed to finally get the documents pulled because Ron Klatz said he would use every last dollar of his organization and personal wealth to destroy them if they try to release this information, which would have told the governments of the world not to put life extension technology for the population. Now, at the same time, these billionaires want the technology for themselves at the Burj Dubai Hotel in Qatar. So where I see things going, and although we say it's not an issue, when for example, when Trump is focusing on the carrier and on the blue-collar workers, we have to realize we're going to hit a singularity here where, yes, you want to manufacture some things in your country, but to be honest, we have a global world. We're moving toward where robotic factories could be anywhere. They can be back in America. But you only have 5 or 6 engineers handling the work of what used to be 600 or 700 or 1,000 workers. And we need to reinvent what an economy is. And that economy is going to be based on data and technology. And we're not planning that educational leap. None of us, not even the Chinese are, because they're still focused on the idea of manufacturing physical goods for their massive population, their high levels of engineers and so on. And so they're adapting better than us, but nobody is up to the curve of the singularity that's going to hit all of us. That's beyond the debt and so on. This is a bigger issue, I think, in terms of what it's going to do to the world economy. It's the revolution in the singularity. And it's not going to be something that's going to take years and years to happen. It's happening right now. Like in Foxconn facility, they already make a lot of the iPhones and iPads by robotic manufacturing. So I don't think we're prepared for it. The same way as medicine. I can put a van together with the bioplasm, the QRMA, blood testing, a nutraceutical barista. The bioplasm will actually diagnose faster without any invasive radiology any condition you have. We can do that now. So we don't understand that the economic revolution is a singularity that's going to overtake us all, and we're not prepared for it, and I don't believe even Trump is. Does that make sense?
Again, the one point I would make that goes somewhat outside of that analysis, and we are moving into a new arena in a whole number of areas, as you indicate.
Right.
But we still need to produce food. We still need infrastructure. You still need the bridges. And what I just did a report the other day on the collapse of the manufacturing economy in the United States since 1999. Between 1999 and 2014, we lost 6 million manufacturing jobs. Those have not been replaced by the great so-called Obama recovery. In fact, most of the jobs created are temporary, short-term, and low-wage. We have 45 million people on food stamps. We have 94 million people of working age who are out of the workforce. And even if you assume that a third of them are just bums who don't want to work, that's 60-something million people.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case.
Can't get jobs.
I think that the District of Criminals in the last 30 years has grown like a giant beast, sucking like the blood out of America. And you're right, a lot of the jobs are being exported because transnational corporations and tax law and so on is making it advantageous to move those jobs elsewhere, like, to Ford.
And what you're talking about as the succubus in Washington, D.C., what's grown is political consultants and defense and security contractors. There's huge amounts of money in that.
Right.
You talk about $1 billion lost here and there in Iraq, $2 billion lost in Afghanistan. Someone's taking that money. That money's going to someone. And then that money shows up in offshore accounts, and then next thing you know, Al-Qaeda has man pads to shoot down passenger flights. So, we're looking at a situation which is out of control. And the way to bring it under control is that you've got to write down the debt, which means that people who think they're rich because they're holding huge volumes of derivative debt are soon going to find out that they have nothing but the paper.
Yeah, but we have to understand, though, that underlying that, it's a controlled demolition, just like the World Trade Center, like the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas many years ago. The economy is not just a juggernaut heading toward disaster, it's being steered toward it.
Well, the policies that are being adopted are doing that, but I think some of the policymakers don't think that they're destroying it. They think they're moving it into this new phase. And they're sadly mistaken, because the reality is, whether they intend to collapse it or not, they don't understand what a healthy economy is. They think it's speculative.
I think there's some people like that, but I think that the top people that really are in the know, that probably we don't even know their names, I guarantee you that they know this is a controlled demolition, which is why many of them are acquiring gold like crazy, because they know they're going to blow out all the currencies.
Let's name the names. The royal family and their entourage in England basically are doing this because they see this as the best way to reduce the world's population, which is their intention. Right,
and it will. I mean, for every drop for every 1% increase in the unemployment rate, 42,000 people died. That was in the movie The Big Short. I don't think it's an actual statistic. So what it means is, as you get more and more unemployed people, you get more people who die prematurely, more people die in general.
Well, you see it in terms of white middle-aged males, the 44 to 65 age group. Suicide is now one of the highest killers, and it's related to drug abuse, alcohol abuse. But what does that come from? Hopelessness, people who are giving up. Do you know that the rate of suicide among girls 10 to 14 in this country has tripled in the last 5 years? 10-year-old girls killing themselves. Why?
Well, I can tell you.
It's a degenerate culture.
Well, three things: Facebook, peer pressure, and the media.
Yeah.
So, Harley, let's proceed. What's the next major area we need to discuss? Because I think these things that we're talking about are going to determine whether our civilization here in America or around the world is going to survive or not. And it's the personal decision of informed public that will control and elect the right officials. We need to control and act as a fourth arm of government, or we're going to have a disaster here. And we really couldn't have direct democracy right now because too many people are uninformed or disinformed. But as they get more informed, they need to also control their politicians to make sure they don't do terrible things to our policies that will put us in danger or truncate our ability to develop what we should.
Well, let me give you an example of something that we've been talking about here the last few days about why the population is missing what's going on internationally. It's not just that we have a bad media. It does go to this question, the deeper question of real education. Now, most of the world on May 8th, 9th, or 10th celebrates the Victory in Europe Day, the end of World War II. We don't. I mean, we used to when we had World War II vets. But around the world, there was something that was launched by Putin, which is very interesting. It's called the Immortal Regiment. And in Russia, you have, and Putin started this, where he actually has marched each of the 5 years they've done this, people who have family members who died in World War II march on that day as a commemoration of the sacrifices made by relatives. This used to be the idea of Veterans Day or Memorial Day, but in this country it's really been lost. And in Russia, where they take it seriously, but also this year there were commemorations even in Berlin, in New York City they started it. But the problem is, here we have a situation where we had an alliance in World War II against an evil, which unfortunately was with the British, who helped create the Hitler movement. Hitler was defeated by an alliance largely of the United States and the Russians, but the Russians suffered the most. They put out the most. Russia has been an ally of ours in the American Revolution, in the U.S. Civil War, and yet you have Obama, who is functioning from a Brzezinski British geopolitical playbook, which says that Russia is our enemy.
Right.
And so as a result, we can't take any satisfaction from the Russian devastation that was unleashed on ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. In fact, Obama's taking credit for it, as though he actually did something, when our forces, and we're sending more and more people into Iraq, and they're getting caught up in a quagmire there. There's not a solution with the Obama policy in the Middle East. So why don't people like John McCain and others speak out against it? Because they're part of the anti-Russian mentality. The Cold War mentality is dying hard, and it's propagated so that if you talk to an average American and say, what do you think about Russia? Most Americans don't know much about it, but they'll tell you initially they're worried about it. Then you bring up what Putin did to fight ISIS as opposed to what Obama did, and people say, oh, I didn't know that. That's great. So we don't have a historic perspective from our education. The media is nothing but pure propaganda.
Right. Now, and there's another side to that, too. We'll talk about that in the third hour with Joel Skousen. Although we have similar goals, and as Trump says, we can deal with ISIS together, since the fall of the Soviet Union, which Russia is not really happy about the financial fall that we helped to create on them, they feel it was unfair what we did, including recruiting nations to NATO right on their border, like Georgia, with Saakashvili. So people need to understand this. Russia wants to not develop the Soviet Union again, because it's a post-Soviet, post-communist empire now. It has become a Christian socialist empire, and it does want to extend its influence back to its satellite nations. And the fact that we keep on shoving in their face nuclear missiles on the Polish-Russian border, we keep on making attacks against Russian citizens in parts of Ukraine where the vast majority of the population are Russian, I think...
By the way, you know where Saakashvili is right now?
Where?
He's an official in a Ukrainian district.
Oh, no.
Because the Georgians threw him out. So he ends up working in Ukraine as a regional oligarch.
Oh, my. Of course, you know. The real problem is that Russia wants respect. They don't want war, and they only basically protect the fatherland. They're not interested in other than having a proper relationship with their satellite nations. They find it offensive that we're expanding NATO. That's the reality. Lines up the last 5 minutes of the show on geopolitical topics only, by the way. The first article is Be Critical, Be Human. It's the only path to survival. I think what I'd say is we need to have the singularity of the global epiphany to connect with other human beings of other nations and to living things on the planet, because we're destroying it. And Space Station to Earth on Victory Day. It's interesting. I think Earth Day was recently, too, wasn't it? dreams, achievements are possible in a world without war. We're on the edge of becoming a galactic civilization. We have to understand that. People watch Star Trek and other sci-fi movies, but the real thing is many of the things they imagined in Star Trek when it first came out will actually become technologies in the real world. We're not going to go there, and we're not going to reach there unless we start to resolve our differences by becoming empathic. It's not just technology. The technology won't even be released unless we become empathic to each other. We've hidden technology from the public. We've misused technology like space weather modification. And why are we using nuclear fusion technology when we have tokamak fusion reactors? Why are we, having other countries use dirty coal when we can give them natural gas and oil, which will benefit us financially and benefit the Chinese and benefit planet Earth?
If you listen to what Scott Kelly said when he came back from a year in the space station, and also what the cosmonaut who was with him said, it's what is said by virtually everyone who's had that experience of space travel, which is that when you're off the Earth and you look down at the Earth, you see that we're one planet and one people, and that the technology that enables us to get off the Earth and then look at it from that perspective ought to be used for the benefit of all people. And there was a visionary named Kraft Erika. He was a scientist from Germany who came to the United States, and he wrote a book called The Extraterrestrial Imperative, where he wrote about the importance of creating an ability of man to explore the universe and to use that exploration both to discover new things but also to learn more about ourselves, the creative potential of each human being.
Right.
And when we talk about Obama as a Satanist, we should take a moment just to look at what the contrary view is, which is to the extent that one accepts the injunction from Genesis to give, in which God gives man dominion over nature, we're given that power of creativity. It doesn't mean we're perfect or that we're God, but it means we have that capability, each of us, to act in a way that's for the benefit of all other men. This is, to me, what the teachings of Jesus were about. And you look at so many of these self-proclaimed Christians who attack the Muslim fanatics, and you realize that some of them have a very similar point of view. And this is not the point of view that you and I are discussing as a positive nationalist approach, which starts from the standpoint that we develop our nation for the good of all nations and the good of all people. And that was how the Founding Fathers looked at it. Not that they didn't want to go all over the world to create wars. They wanted us to demonstrate that we could be a city on a hill.
Right.
We could show that representative government can work, that a Republican democracy is possible, or a democratic republic, you might say, is possible. And we're so far from that right now. You look at the Democratic Party with Hillary Clinton, the anointed one, just got beaten again yesterday in West Virginia. Now, why? Because she's a terrible candidate. This is not about Bernie Sanders. It's about, at the end of an era, getting worse and worse candidates. We've had two of the worst presidents in our nation's history with Bush Jr. and Obama. If Hillary gets in, it will continue the downward degeneration.
Right.
So this is going, and this is partly related to the idea of accepting this view that there are too many people, that we've reached the end of technological advance, that man's scientific discoveries are what's destroying the planet, which is nonsense. The planet went through cold ice ages and heating long before there were people on the planet. The idea that you have combustion engines and factories and things of that sort, that's not what causes climate change. Climate change is much bigger than that.
Well, there's three factors mainly. The first factor is we're heading into a moderate cooling period, which is every 360 years, and every geologist and climatologist knows that. Second is galactic issues. And thirdly, it's the fact that we are doing things now to modify the weather using high-energy upper atmospheric plasma interferometry. So we're becoming but we're not. But it's not about pollution.
Bill, you get something like, and I can't remember whether it was a Democratic or Republican debate. I think it was a Republican debate where the moderator was talking about flooding in the streets of Miami and fish on the streets in Miami, as though that were actually happening.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
According to Al Gore in his 2000 campaign, we should already have lost whole sections of Florida, and Manhattan should be in danger of being underwater soon.
Yeah,
These are scare tactics for what purpose? To eliminate whole sections of the human population by destroying the science and technology needed to sustain people.
Well, the most deadly thing that they talk about, and this is both the Pope and the POTUS, the President of the United States, is carbon credits. Nothing will kill more people on Earth than carbon credits. And I know there's been criticism leveled against Lyndon LaRouche saying he's a communist. What a pile of garbage. He is a scientific, we call geopolitical analyst. And I don't like to do putting labels left and right. For example, my policy in healthcare would provide healthcare to all at reasonable costs. The problem is,
and in the current political situation, that's considered socialist or communist.
And we don't need that. We don't want total control from the top down.
But it's also a totally fraudulent conception that if you want to make sure that people have health care, that you're somehow a communist.
Well, the first thing is most people don't realize the ancient Israelites, the Cohens, which are the doctors, the health providers, and the high priests who go in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, you never had to pay premiums or worried about being excluded because of pre-existing conditions. Even in ancient China, you'd pay the doctor all the time, and then you stop paying him when you get ill because it's, in sense, his partial responsibility that you're not healthy. So the system we have is, I call bass-ackwards. We have a system that's developed that's now killing people. Under Obamacare, death panels are killing people. And I hear Obama, even at this so-called recent dinner he had for his press corps, and he's cracking jokes about, I'm waiting for my death panel. This is not funny, you monster. There are people every day that are being denied care that's killing them under your health care bill.
Yeah.
Right. So
this is, and look, this is an important point because he also made a reference to the Red Wedding. I guess it's in the Game of Thrones where there was a bloody atrocity at a wedding, talking about that as his policy with drone strikes on weddings. These are not funny. You know, the fact is we have to realize that the fact that he thinks this is funny shows that he's an unempathetic psychotic.
Yeah, this is a guy who should never get day passes, be in a lockdown psychiatric ward, in a posy jacket, so he doesn't have anything sharp he can hurt himself or anyone else. There are actual journalists in Pakistan that said, do not have an outdoor wedding near the Pakistani-Afghanistani border, or you're going to get droned by Obama. They actually said this in the news in Pakistan.
Well, and the other thing that Obama's drone policy did was that we copied from the terrorists. That is, we'd send in a drone strike, and then when the doctors and the first responders showed up, send in a second drone.
Yeah, you want to blow up the arms and legs and heads of the EMTs and doctors. You can't let them rescue people that are bleeding out or dying in the open grounds. No, you want to blow up them as well.
And that's
what they're
done
doing
in the name of fighting terrorism. Well, what that does is it recruits people to want to become terrorists.
Who is a terrorist? Who's a terrorist?
Yeah,
it's a way of growing
behavior.
It grows new crops of terrorists.
That Obama praises himself by saying, "I'm good at killing." Who would have thought that?
Well, let's put it this way.
That was meant as a joke again.
Think of the broom as a terrorist, and the sorcerer's apprentice chops the broom up and it becomes 1,000 brooms. So in a sense, he's the sorcerer's apprentice to create a whole new crop of terrorists by his very policies and behavior.
You know, I saw last night something on Fox News that I never thought I'd see. Greg Gutfield, who's this kind of cynical, snot-nosed character on there, said, "Is it too late to impeach Obama?" Now, this should have been the subject of much discussion going back 5 years ago. Should we impeach him? Right. The fact that we've waited till now, but when the evidence is overwhelming that he's committing crimes against humanity, that he's violating the Constitution virtually at every step, your listeners have a responsibility, not just to listen to this and then use this as polite background conversation at parties, but to act for the future, for your children and grandchildren, by moving now to insist that we're not waiting until January of next year for President Trump or a President Hillary. We've got to move now to put the pressure on throwing Obama out.
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous. I expect three things could happen. One, an attempted assassination of Trump, which I think is very highly likely. Number two is a purposeful contraction and collapse of the economy. Third is a provocation, especially with rearming ISIS and the Turks.
Well, a false flag, yeah.
Yeah, and the likelihood of we're going to have a major conflict with Russia in Syrian theater is extremely likely, and Obama wants this. I mean, he's drooling like a vampire saying, yes, yes, do it. It's wonderful. He wants this to happen because it means he can get a bipartisan domestic security bill. He can become president for life. He can become a dictator, and they'll preempt the elections. That's a very grave danger unless we impeach this monster.
Well, I think what they're trying to do is rig it for Hillary so that he can go off into the sunset and make his billions of dollars.
Well,
this other joke at the correspondence dinner is that he's preparing for his life after the White House, where he goes and speaks at Goldman Sachs and gets rich.
Yeah, I think it's more likely
that wasn't a joke. That was his actual policy plan.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I think also whether he's a policy advisor or someone higher up in the new refurbished United Nations, because they do manage to get carbon credits. Those carbon credits don't go back to the U.S. They go to an international body called the UN. And what people need to understand is once you get funding, you have a rapid reaction force, an army, an enforcement arm of the globalist bankers that crosses national borders, and now you got a real problem on your hands.
What I would suggest, since I'm coming short on time now,
right,
is that people do go to our website, LaRouchePAC.com, to get the information. But if you want to get active, what you need to do is type in action.LaRouchePAC.com/Harley. And if you put in your email, I'll make sure you get the daily lead that we offer, which is sort of an editorial every day. And it will also put you in contact with me. And I'm trying to coordinate a genuine impeachment movement. We have hundreds of thousands of people who would like to see Obama go, probably millions of people, but at least hundreds of thousands who have said, well, what do I do? How can you do it? Well, we'll tell you how to do it. There are congressmen who are thinking about doing something. They need to get their rear ends burned. The idea in the old days of bringing buckets of tar and feathers to congressional town meetings, that's not a bad idea, although you don't have to physically threaten people. Just bring the feathers.
Yeah, well, threaten them is to not reelect them.
Yeah, just say you're a chicken, and why should we send you to Washington when you're going to represent the big banks and the big corporations? We don't need that. Who's representing us?
Yeah, but they don't even represent the big banks anymore. The big banks are actually vassals of the intelligence agencies. The real issue is we already have world government that's behind the scenes. And
the intelligence agencies came out of the big banks. If you go back and look at the history
of course
of the
they
CIA,
did. But,
it was all the white shoe law firms and the bankers who provided the foot soldiers for the post-war period. And there was a fight up through the Kennedy administration between the genuine patriots who had come in under Roosevelt with Bill Donovan versus the Dulles types, the Harriman types, the real traitors,
right,
who were pushing at that point for the destruction of the United States and our Constitution. And that fight continues to this day. And it's the pro-British faction, which includes the Bush family and it includes Obama. In a sense, Bush wasn't smart enough, and to tell you the truth, I don't think Obama's smart enough to come up with these things. It's being force-fed to them.
Right. He's just a sock puppet for Satan, I say. Yeah. Sock puppet. You like that, eh? Sock puppet for Satan.
Sock puppet for Satan. There's a certain ring to that.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. And it wouldn't be on. It wouldn't be on the same street as Sesame Street. It would not be. We'll call what's the main street? It'll be Sock Puppet for Satan on Pennsylvania Street, Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah. Well, we have a nightmare on Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's a national nightmare, and we may not emerge from it if we don't get a change. And the change is not just sitting back and hoping Trump wins. For people who are supporters of Trump, while I admire the fact that he eviscerated the Bush family and that he's torn apart the leadership of the Republican Party, you can't rely on him. You've got to have a movement that's bigger than him, with a commitment to the economic nationalist policies of Glass-Steagall, of Hamiltonian banking, of infrastructure investment, and a real education which teaches our children to think critically for themselves.
Yeah, I think what we're doing when we do programs like this is getting people to realize it isn't painful to become an objective learner. It's really driven other people. Right now we know the universities, we had Professor Bill Warner talking about this from Tennessee State University, does political Islam on his website, and we have him on every week or two. He said all the universities have taken out critical thinking, and they want to prevent you from any kind of psychic pain, so you can't criticize anybody, you can't even bring up ideas, even in the scientific realm, that make other people within your so-called specialty uncomfortable. I mean, that's a fact.
Well, not acting at this point is going to bring you more pain than the problems you'll face initially from challenging popular opinion.
Well, that's why we have politicians.
Ultimately, we'll prevail.
Yeah.
We'd better do it sooner rather than later and risk losing humanity in the process.
Yeah, there's political scientists and pundits that are now saying they want to actually jail and or fine people who don't believe in climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me? Where is Takamata?
It is a Gestapo.
Where is Takamata when you need him, eh?
Yeah. All right, I'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Back in a moment, we'll have a short segment with some open line. Send the board up, Dan, your questions. 800-313-9443. Hour number 2 coming up, Health and Wellness. And hour number 3, Joel Scows and World Affairs Brief. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Firstly, if you're trying to listen to the Nutrimedical Report program, we have a couple of new additions that are pretty amazing. We actually have set up now a phone number to listen to the latest episodes of the Nutrimedical Report and Continuous Loop. And I'll be sending over the May ones for the last 9 episodes, 9 days. The number to listen to that on Continuous Loop is 701-801-2263, and it'll be posted up here after the show today. We also have many new functions over at the DeagleNetwork.com, which include our blog and forum, so you can actually contact and start contacting Michelle to connect with each other around the world, which is pretty amazing. Just want to run through some of the new functionality that's available there. At the top, click is the go to Showcast, listen to the live show. The second is a Nutrimedical Report. By the way, we're working on trying to eventually have it so you'll dial a phone number and the show will replay 8 times a day. Not just the last 9 shows. So that if you don't have a computer and you just have a phone number, you dial that number and you'll hear the show repeated. The second button down is the Nutrimedical Archives, and I recommend you sign up for the podcast. It'll download to your phone automatically, and we have all the registries of all the different podcast systems on the planet. And I strongly recommend all the other hosts do that too, because you have to get your show on, I guess the term I would say, you got to get your show on the phone. If you get it on people's phones, it makes a big difference. The paradigm in the past used to be to get it to radio stations. Radio stations are now going to pick up the RSS feed off schedule, and they can fit it in with their schedule. It'll work much better to get a bigger footprint. We're trying to help other hosts on this network so we can get them up to speed. In fact, we're putting together a PowerPoint and a video to explain what we've done here in the last months with my tech experts in New York, Jim Garcia and Mauricio and others. And the third button down is the RBN Listen button. And Zeno has provided a phone number, 605-562-5111. That's very important. You can listen to the show live on that number. Or if you have an Android phone, 712-775-6827. Now, the next button down is called Vimeo Video HD Video channel. And I have 13 different channels on Vimeo now. There are some also pay-per-view videos that we put up. They're documentaries, etc., and wellness condition videos. Those are all available. And those will be expanding dramatically over the next few months. We're also developing an RSS feed to fit to all of the other stations. So we have a YouTube channel and any other form of video system on the planet, we'll be feeding our information directly over to those video channels as well. And they're all searchable because they're all tagged. I put tags on every show, every video, so you can actually search by topic, especially over on our deagle-network.com. Next is live stream channel. It's important that you sign up for the live stream, because we will tell you when we're doing a video. It might be a half an hour, might be an hour and a half after the show. We'll do a recap, maybe 10, 20 minutes, half hour. And then the next one, of course, deals with our live stream nutraceutical channel on, check it out. You're going to find out that we're providing a lot of services here for you to get your pathways to wellness. And I will coordinate with other doctors, clinics around the world. This is not just kind of flogging nutraceuticals. We give you the best nutritional advice, medical advice, stem cell advice, and regenerative medicine on the planet. Do contact us, 888-212-8871, or contact us by email. And anybody can get an email consult, an email response. Those that are regular customers get a phone call back, and anybody can purchase a consultation. We'll be back in a few minutes with hour number 2. Stay there.